With the CB1000 Hornet, Honda has already proved that they have a very capable motorbike for road use in its range. With the new 1000 GT though, they now also want to show that they can meet the demands of touring riders just as well. And how it works and which details lie behind it, you will see in a moment. Yes, with the new GT, Honda wants to offer touring riders quite a lot. You could say they have taken a Hornet and with a few modifications made sure it is properly set up for long distances, so it fits the touring category and can meet those demands. We will take a look at the details one by one. They have tried to build on the riding dynamics of the CB1000 Hornet, and that is why they have carried over a lot from the Hornet, including the chassis. The chassis is basically the same as the one used on the Hornet. They have made small changes at the rear section because on the GT, the Panniers system and the pillion grab handles require different demands on the tail and subframe. So they have made a few changes here. But overall, the frame is the same. It is a tubular steel frame with two lower rails at the engine. The engine is also partly used as a stressed member to create extra rigidity. The next thing you notice is the bike's fairing. That is obviously important for touring use because you want plenty of wind protection. At the front we have a fairly large fairing, then we have these extensions on the tank, no wings, but they almost look like it. Additional side panels that guide the wind nicely past the rider, even at higher speeds. We also have a large windscreen at the front, which can additionally be adjusted in height. You can see that quite nicely. They have solved it very well with a mechanical release, which you can also adjust quite comfortably. If we follow the bike visually further towards the rear, we immediately see the Pannier system. The panniers are built quite large, which means you have quite a lot of storage space. You have 38 liters on the left side and 27 liters on the right side. That is because, of course, the right side case needs the cutout at the bottom to accommodate the large silencer somehow, so the volume on that side is a bit smaller. All in all, you have to say that the width of the panniers, or the overall width of the bike at the panniers, has been chosen so that it is a bit narrower than the overall width at the front. That means if you want to thread your way through city traffic, you have a very good reference to check whether you will fit through or not. It can be dangerous if the rear sticks out wider than the front, because you can end up catching something behind you that is no longer in your line of sight. So they have done a good job selecting this width. For the pillion, there is plenty of seating room. It is very pillion friendly. There are large grab handles at the back, so the pillion does not always have to brace against the rider. That has been done very well. The seat height is now slightly higher than on the Hornet, so the knee angle is more relaxed. The low footrest position also contributes to this, because the footrests are noticeably lower than on the Hornet, ensuring a comfortable knee angle. The seat height, since we have already mentioned it, is 825 millimeters. For very short riders that might be slightly borderline, but still workable. Because the bike is so light, you can still handle it well when standing still. Taller riders from around 1.80 meters upwards will still have a relaxed knee angle on the bike, and that of course helps on long trips. Everything we have just mentioned is standard equipment on this bike. The pannier system, the adjustable windscreen and the handguards, which we have not even mentioned yet but are also included. All of that is standard. So I would say we move on straight to the heart of the bike, the engine. The engine is the well-known 1000 cubic centimeter inline four-cylinder from the 2017 Fireblade. Just like on the Hornet, we have the same components here. The mapping is slightly different, the exhaust system is slightly different, and they have tried to give the engine a little more torque at the bottom. That is why the data and the performance of the engine are very similar to the Hornet, with no major differences. Peak power is 150 horsepower at 11,000 revolutions per minute, and torque is 110 around 2 Newton meters at 8,750. If you compare that directly, the Hornet has around 2 horsepower more and around 2 Newton meters more. So there is a small difference, but hardly anyone will notice it. What they also changed to improve touring performance is that they have made 6th gear slightly longer. This allows relaxed motorway cruising without high revs, making it more economical and quieter. In terms of roll-on performance, that is not always an advantage, but we will talk about that later when we discuss riding impressions. We also have a slipper clutch, which is practically standard on modern motorbikes. Combined with the automatic Quickshifter, or more accurately the blipper system, since you can shift both up and down without using the clutch, it is a pleasant feature. When you downshift several gears quickly, the rear wheel does not hop or skip, which smooths out the power delivery. Moving on to the electronics. These days, electronics are one of the most important aspects of a motorbike because so much is controlled through them. We have a 6-axis IMU, which detects the riding state and sends the relevant signals and data to the traction control, the ABS, and so on. The more precisely the system knows the bike's riding condition, the better these control systems can do their job. These rider assists, including traction control and wheelie control, are assigned to certain presets. We have 4 riding modes stored from the factory: Standard, Sport, Rain and Tour. Each one has fixed predefined values assigned to it. I can select them very easily using the mode switch while riding. There is also an additional user mode where I can combine the different settings however I want and then call them up while riding as well. What you must bear in mind though is that you can only enter the menu where these settings are adjusted when the bike is stationary. While riding, you can no longer make changes to these assignments. You can only pre-program them beforehand and then call them up via the mode switch on the left side while riding. Of course, if you have lots of control systems and values, you also need them displayed. That is handled by the 5-inch TFT color display, which has been treated with a special coating to minimize reflections and similar disturbances. This has genuinely brought noticeable improvement. We are here in the Spanish sunshine near Benidorm, and today we rode a loop of around 150 kilometers. You could clearly see that even under very intense sunlight, the display remained easy to read. It is also easy to operate. What I personally like is that the controls have been designed to be relatively straightforward. You have a 4-way switch with which you can move through the entire menu structure, and you confirm selections with a central press. That makes it very simple without having to study anything in depth to find and adjust all the menu options. That is not always a given. On modern bikes, you often get lost in the menu structure and lose the overview you would actually like to have. Since we are already talking about electronics, we should also talk about the electrical equipment. This includes the heated grips. The heated grips are standard and work very well. What I especially like is that activating them is very comfortable thanks to a button on the left positioned right next to your hand where it is easy to reach. With that button I can set the heating output in 4 different levels. The button has small indicator lights and the flashing pattern shows which level is currently active. Unfortunately, you do not see this instantly on the main display. For that, you first need to open a sub-menu. There you see the heating level displayed. It would perhaps be simpler if this were shown more clearly on the main screen, but it is still easy enough to use. The indicators have an automatic cancel function. That means when I put the indicator on for a turn, I do not need to switch it off afterwards. The bike recognizes the situation automatically thanks to the 6-axis IMU and switches the indicator off after the corner. What we also have is the smart key system. You simply carry the key with you in order to activate the ignition. Connectivity is also already implemented, as it is practically everywhere these days. You can pair the bike's electronics with your phone and then access many additional functions such as navigation, voice control and so on, which you can have played through the headset in your helmet. Of course, you first have to set up the system, but after that you can pair it with the bike without any difficulty and have the information not only visually on the display but also in your ears. We have turn-by-turn navigation, but again only in connection with the phone, which provides the GPS data. The bike does not have an integrated GPS receiver, so offline navigation is not possible. You need the phone connection. If you are using a phone, it is not uncommon that it runs flat eventually. To prevent that, there is a USB charging socket positioned very accessibly directly under the display. That means the phone can always stay charged and not cause problems. Also included in the standard electronic equipment is the cruise control. Cruise control today is almost indispensable on touring bikes, so it is good that it is already included here. You activate the system on the right side, and then on the left you select the speed you want to ride at. You must be riding at least 50 kilometers an hour for the system to activate. Below 50, it cannot be used. Earlier we briefly spoke about the chassis. What is worth mentioning compared with the CB1000 Hornet is that almost nothing has changed except for small details. The seating position on the motorbike, however, has been noticeably adjusted. The Hornet is by its nature very sporty. Here we want a high level of comfort, so they have changed several aspects of the riding position, the seat height, the footrest height and position, and other elements. What is even more important, as I will show by sitting on it briefly, is that the seating triangle has been changed quite significantly. The footrests are not only lower but further forward compared with the Hornet, and the handlebar is positioned much higher and closer to the rider. When you sit on it, you see that your upper body is almost completely upright rather than very front wheel focused as on the Hornet. You sit comfortably and in a relaxed way, and of course you benefit from the large windscreen at the front. Something that belongs on a touring bike and many riders would not want to do without is a center stand. The center stand is also included as standard. That is no longer something you can take for granted, since many manufacturers charge extra for it. The wheels are designed in a 5Y spoke layout. The rear tire is a 180 section and the front a 120 section, which is a sensible balance for good handling and grip. Moving on to the suspension, here we also have something new. We do not have a conventional suspension setup, but rather a fully electronic one from Showa. Showa is Honda's longtime supplier, so they developed something new together for the GT. In the sports touring segment, you benefit greatly from such electronic suspension because it can cover a very wide range of situations. At the front, we have a 43mm upside-down fork with electronic control. That alone is not particularly new, but something I really like from a suspension engineering standpoint is that a stroke sensor is integrated into the left fork leg. This sensor measures the travel. The IMU data mainly tell you about the riding state, but the sensor tells you exactly how much suspension travel is being used at any moment. The right fork leg contains only the damping, which is controlled via a solenoid valve. That has a big advantage. Solenoid valves react extremely quickly compared with conventional valves that are operated by servo or stepper motors. Because of that, they can implement control commands within 15 milliseconds and adjust damping almost instantly. So this varies depending on the riding situation and the mode you have selected. There are 4 riding modes and each has different damping characteristics. The rear shock is also electronically controlled and additionally has electronic preload adjustment. That is extremely convenient if you ride with varying loads at the rear, luggage, pillion or both, because you can adjust the preload through the bike's electronics so that even a heavy load is properly compensated. At the front fork you can also adjust the spring preload, but you still have to do that in the traditional way using a spanner. You will not find the preload adjusters at the top of the fork legs as you might be used to. They are located at the bottom in the fork foot in case you go looking for them. As for the brakes, Honda once again relies on its long-standing supplier Nissin. Nissin provides 2 front discs, each with a diameter of 310 mm and at the rear a 240 mm disc. That should be perfectly adequate depending on the brake pad compound to achieve solid braking performance. Of course, we also have cornering ABS, which receives its information from the 6-axis IMU in order to deliver effective regulation. And now we come to the most important part of our test, the riding characteristics of the bike. Overall, you have to say that the seating position is, as we said earlier, genuinely comfortable. Today, we have ridden roughly between 100 and 150 kilometers, and you can comfortably stay on the bike for that long with no problem at all. I normally come more from the sporty side of motorbikes, and I have to say that you sit really comfortably on this machine. What works very well is that the seat is not only wide but also very flat. That means you sit almost like on a chair in a very comfortable way without your sit bones being placed under heavy pressure. That has been executed very well. The knee angle is relaxed. We have a very upright upper body, which is not disturbing even at higher speeds because thanks to the adjustable windscreen at the front, which is of course standard, there is very little pressure on the upper body. Even at high speeds, we find good wind protection. Something I really liked while riding was that at around 170 to 180 kilometers an hour, I tried to adjust the windscreen position. That is not completely trivial at those speeds because there is a lot of wind pressure on such a large surface. But you can see that the engineers really put a lot of thought into this because even under high wind pressure, the screen can still be adjusted very easily. There are 5 different positions in which the screen can be altered, not only in angle, but in some cases raised further upwards. I hope you can see it when I demonstrate it here. And because of that mechanism, which needs to be quite substantial, it is remarkable that even at wind pressure beyond 180 to 200 kilometers an hour, the screen can still be moved with one hand without any trouble. That is definitely a highlight. The engine in the new GT, as we know from the Hornet, has very strong peak power, but needs roughly 6,000 revolutions per minute before it really comes alive. It pulls away from low revs very smoothly, with no issues and no vibrations. You can open the throttle from idle and it pulls away cleanly. But from around 6,000 revs upwards, the real thrust arrives. That means if you want the full 150 horsepower, you need to ride at relatively high revs. Personally, I would prefer a bit more low-down torque, which would underline the touring character of this type of bike even more. On a touring bike, we do not want to be riding constantly in the upper rev range. We want plenty of torque available from low revs. That is an area where, in the future, they could perhaps make further improvements. Otherwise, the engine is excellent, the gears shift well, you really notice how well the Quickshifter works. But the Quickshifter does have one small downside. The Quickshifter is not only meant for acceleration but also for downshifts. It is a blipper, meaning you can downshift with a closed throttle and it gives a throttle blip to make the gear change possible. What does not work, however, is shifting up into a higher gear with a closed throttle. This situation occurs rarely, usually when you roll into a town after accelerating and want to continue riding at low revs. You naturally roll off the throttle to slow down and then want to shift up. That does not work. I briefly asked the Japanese engineers who were present about this because I wanted to know whether that should be possible or whether something is planned. They held a brief but very intense discussion in Japanese. And I thought it best not to push the topic any further. In any case, it is something that could be added very easily in the future via a software update because it is ultimately only a software function. So for the future, it would be nice if Honda could address that as well. The electronic suspension we mentioned earlier works very well. It has a very broad adjustment range and the differences between the modes are noticeable. In the preset modes, you have fixed combinations, engine performance, throttle response and a matching suspension setting. Beyond that, there is not much more you can adjust, except the rear preload, which you can always vary, even in the preset modes. If you want to individualize everything fully, you must go into user mode. User mode is also included as standard, so it is not something you have to buy. You simply use it and set things however you like. Thanks to the longer suspension travel compared with the Hornet, the bike is very comfortable for touring, but still on the sporty side. When you ride over stronger bumps or edges, it is, for my taste, almost a little too firm for a touring motorbike where I would ideally want maximum comfort. But in return, at higher speeds, it is stable and sporty and provides good feedback. And that brings us to another important point, stability on a touring motorbike. On a touring bike like this one, you usually have panniers fitted at the rear, and depending on wind and air pressure, they often cause turbulence and slight instability, especially at higher speeds. So compared with the Hornet, they have made a few more changes. They have extended the trail by 8 mm. Trail is a value that determines how agile or how stable a bike feels. They increase the trail by reducing the offset of the triple clamps. The Hornet has an offset of 35 mm and here it is 8 mm less. This results in increased stability. And that has proven to be helpful, especially at higher speeds, because from around 180 km an hour the GT begins. I would not say to become unstable, but you can sense that it starts to feel a bit light. Today we also had very strong crosswinds. With the Panniers system, you notice a bit of movement. It is never dangerous or unpleasant, but you can feel that a bit of precision is missing. But they have already worked in the right direction. Thanks to the increased trail, the bike has more stability than the Hornet in direct comparison. In terms of riding behavior, we are clearly in the touring category. The seating position alone means you are not front wheel oriented, but thanks to the well-judged suspension setup, you have a good feel for the tires and can still ride the bike surprisingly quickly. The only limiting factor for me was the lean angle because the footrests are mounted lower. On very grippy tarmac like we had today, it can happen that the footrests touch down briefly on one side or the other. But that is not a problem. Big peg feelers are fitted and those touch first. The center stand, which is one of the really important points, and it never touched down. And that is the more critical one. Regarding rider aids, Honda has stayed on the conservative side because for touring, they want to give the rider plenty of stability and safety. Depending on the intervention level, you can choose from 3 levels. You can vary how often and how strongly the system intervenes. Even at the lowest level, you still get noticeable intervention, especially at high lean angles. That means you stay on the safe side. For those who want to ride more aggressively and want more power available at lean, you can switch the aids off. But be careful, the system turns itself back on automatically once the bike has been switched off and on again for safety reasons. As we already mentioned, the readability of the TFT display today was excellent all day, and the heated grips definitely earned their place. In the morning we had around 10 degrees, which was quite chilly, and I was glad we had heated grips available. You could adjust them to the different levels, and on the maximum level there was enough heat to ride longer distances comfortably with warm fingers. As for the brakes, as we said earlier, they come from Nissin and are excellent. The only point is that the ABS regulation, like the rider aids, is also set up very conservatively. That means that even during very hard braking, the system aims to maintain maximum stability and especially directional stability, even when the rider really pulls the brakes hard. From a sporty perspective, I would prefer a bit more adjustability. There is no way of selecting different ABS levels. From a sportier viewpoint, I would like a little more freedom there, but for riders who prioritize safety, this conservative setup is very well executed. And now we are almost at the end. Perhaps a short conclusion. I have to say, the bike genuinely impressed me. And the big strength of the bike, when you look at everything that is already included as standard, is the price. The price in Europe is around 13,800 euros and right under 12,000 pounds in the UK. For the USA, we still don't have a number, but it shouldn't be far off these prices. That is a very strong offer, because if you look at the competition, that whether it is the Versys or the Suzuki, they are all clearly above that. The BMW XR even more so, although it is in a different category. You really have to say Honda has set a serious marker here, because with this price and this level of standard equipment, they are right up at the front. It will come in 3 colors for those interested. However, you will have to wait, I think, until the second quarter before it reaches the showrooms, based on what I heard today. As for tires, it will leave the factory with either Michelin or Bridgestone. Today we had the Michelin Road 6 fitted and they performed very well. Which tire you ultimately get is something you will need to check. I do not think there is a fixed rule, just ask your trusted dealer. I have to say that with the GT, Honda has put a genuinely good touring motorbike into showrooms. The looks are, of course, always a bit subjective, but personally I think it looks good, especially in red. What do you think? Do you like the bike? Write it down in the comments. I'm glad you stayed with us until the end. I hope I have been able to give you the information you were looking for. So I will wrap it up here in the sunshine and say bye-bye. See you next time. Deswegen verabschiede ich mich aber jetzt aus dem sonnigen Spanien und sage nur mehr Tschüss, Baba, bis zum nächsten Mal.